Admiral Jack Morrison stood on the bridge of the Times, Starfall Times, and looked out at the stars. His ship was old but strong. She had carried him through dozens of battles over 3 long years. Today would be the most important battle of them all. The enemy was called the Dominion. They were a race of conquerors who had swept across 4 star systems and destroyed everything in their path. Millions had died. Entire civilizations had been wiped out, and now humanity and their allies, the Valari Confederacy, were going to end them once and for all. Jack turned to his second-in-command, Lisa Grant. She was young but brilliant. Her fingers moved across the holographic controls like a musician playing an instrument. She knew every ship in the fleet and could track 100 battles at once. "Status report," Jack said. "All human ships are in position," Lisa replied. 32 vessels ready for combat. The Valari fleet is moving behind the moon as planned. Admiral Torvax signals that they are ready. Jack nodded. The plan was simple. Human ships would attack the Dominion defense station from the front. They would draw all the enemy fire and keep them busy. Then the Valari would come from behind and crush them between 2 forces. It was a classic move. It had worked a dozen times before. Lieutenant Kevin Price looked up from his sensor station. He was the youngest officer on the bridge, barely 25 years old. But he had sharp eyes and quick reflexes. Nothing escaped his attention. "Admiral, the Dominion station is powering up weapons," Kevin reported. "They know we are coming." "Good," Jack said. "Let them prepare. It will not save them." He opened a channel to the entire fleet. His voice went out to 32 ships and over 10,000 men and women who trusted him with their lives. "This is Admiral Morrison. For 3 years we have fought beside our Valari allies. We have bled together. We have died together. Today we end this war. Today we destroy the Dominion and bring peace to the galaxy. All ships, begin, attack run." The Times, Starfall Times, surged forward. Her engines roared with power. Behind her, the human fleet followed in perfect formation. They were the finest ships humanity had ever built, crewed by the bravest people who had ever lived. The Dominion defense station opened fire. Bright beams of energy cut through space. The first shots missed, but more were coming. Thousands of weapons turned toward the human fleet. "Shields holding," Lisa reported. "Minor damage to the Times, Thunder Times, and Times, relentless asterisk. Nothing serious." Jack watched the battle unfold on his tactical display. His ships were doing exactly what they were supposed to do. They were keeping the Dominion busy. Now they just needed the Valari to finish the job. "Where is Admiral Torvax?" Jack asked. "He should be attacking by now." Kevin checked his sensors. His face went pale. "Admiral, the Valari fleet is moving, but they are not heading toward the Dominion station." "Taxes? What do you mean?" "They are heading toward us." Jack did not understand at first. It made no sense. The Valari were their allies. They had signed treaties. They had shared technology. They had fought side by side for 3 years. Then the Valari opened fire on the human fleet. The first ship to die was the Times Resolute Asterisk. She was a cruiser with 300 crew members on board. The Valari weapons hit her from behind, where her shields were weakest. She broke apart in seconds. There was no time to escape. No time to send a distress signal. 300 people were just gone. "What the hell?" Kevin shouted. His voice cracked with shock and fear. "The Valari are firing on us." More ships began to die. The Times Courage Times exploded. The Times Defender Times lost power and drifted into the line of fire. The Times Hope Times tried to turn and fight back, but she was hit from both sides at once. Jack finally understood what was happening. This was not a mistake. This was not friendly fire. This was a trap. It was a setup, Lisa whispered. Her face was white. Her hands trembled over her controls. The whole war was a setup. The Valari were never our allies. They were working with the Dominion the whole time. Jack felt something cold settle in his chest. It was not fear. It was something worse. It was the knowledge that he had led his people into a slaughter. All ships, retreat, he ordered. Get out of here. Jump to emergency coordinates. But it was too late for many of them. The human fleet was caught between two enemy forces. The Dominion in front, the Valari behind. Ships were dying everywhere. Escape pods launched into space, only to be shot down by Valari fighters. The Times Starfall Times shook as a Valari weapon hit her port side. Alarms screamed. Crew members fell. Smoke filled the bridge. Jump drive is online, Lisa shouted over the noise. We can get out. Not yet, Jack said. Cover the other ships. Let as many escape as possible. The Times, Starfall Times, turned to face the Valari fleet. She was one ship against dozens. But she did not run. Her weapons fired again and again. She bought time for her sisters to escape. One by one, the surviving human ships jumped away. 14 made it out. 18 did not. When there was no one left to save, Jack finally gave the order. Jump now. The Times Starfall Times vanished from Nexus Prime in a flash of light. Behind them, the Valari fleet stopped firing. They had won. The human force was broken. Admiral Torvax smiled as he watched the last human ship disappear. Send a message to all human frequencies, he ordered. Let them know what has happened here. The message went out across space. It reached every human colony, every station, every ship. The words were simple and terrible. Humanity is too dangerous to exist. The Valari Confederacy and the Dominion Empire have agreed to your extinction. Surrender is not an option. There will be no mercy. On the bridge of the Times Starfall *, Jack Morrison listened to the message in silence. Around him, his surviving crew wept. They had lost friends. They had lost family. They had lost everything they thought they knew about the galaxy. Lisa looked at Jack with tears in her eyes. What do we do now, Admiral? Jack did not answer for a long time. He stared at the stars and thought about the 4,000 people who had died because they trusted the wrong allies. He thought about the colonies that would burn, the families that would be destroyed, the future that had been stolen from humanity. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet but hard as steel. We survive, he said, and then we make them pay for every single life they took. The Times Starfall Times flew on through the darkness of space, carrying the survivors of humanity's greatest defeat. But in that defeat, something new was being born, something that would change the galaxy forever. The Valari had made a terrible mistake. They had hurt humanity badly, but they had not killed them. And now humanity knew the truth about their enemies. There would be a reckoning. It might take years. It might take decades. But it would come. And when it did, the Valari would learn that some enemies should never be left alive. 6 months had passed since the betrayal at Nexus Prime. In that time, humanity had lost everything. The combined Valari and Dominion armada had swept through human space like a fire through dry grass. Colony after colony had fallen. Some surrendered peacefully and were destroyed anyway. Others fought bravely and were destroyed faster. The enemy showed no mercy because they had no intention of leaving anyone alive. The outer colonies fell first. New Manila burned in a single day. The orbital stations above Mars were torn apart piece by piece. The moon bases were bombed until nothing remained but craters and dust. Then they came for Earth. The home of humanity had been protected by the greatest defense grid ever built. Thousands of weapons platforms surrounded the planet. The finest ships in the remaining fleet guarded every approach. For 11 days, they held the line against an enemy that outnumbered them 10-1. On the 12th day, the grid fell. The last defending ships were destroyed. And the bombing began. Now, deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, the surviving leaders of humanity gathered in a bunker that had been built for this very nightmare. The walls were thick, stone and metal. The air was recycled. The lights were dimmed to save power. It felt like a tomb. President Maria Santos stood at the head of a long table. She was a small woman with gray hair and tired eyes. She had been elected to lead humanity during a time of hope and alliance. Now she was leading them through extinction. Report, she said simply. General Carl Hampton stepped forward. He was a big man with a scarred face and hands that had seen combat. He had been a hero once. Now he was just a survivor like everyone else. "The situation is worse than we thought," he said. He pulled up a holographic map of the galaxy. Most of it was covered in red, showing enemy-controlled territory. A few tiny blue dots remained. "We have approximately 200,000 people left across all locations," Carl continued. "Hidden stations in the asteroid belt. Refugee ships that escaped the colonies. Scattered survivors on moons and outposts that the enemy has not found yet." He paused and looked at the map. 47 combat-capable vessels remain. Most of them are damaged. Some can barely fly. We have lost 17 years of technological development. Our shipyards are gone. Our factories are gone. Our academies are gone. The room was silent. Everyone understood what these numbers meant. Humanity was not just defeated, they were nearly extinct. "What about Earth?" someone asked quietly. Carl shook his head. "The surface is gone. They bombed every city, every town, every sign of civilization. 7 billion people lived on Earth before the war. We believe less than 10,000 survived in deep bunkers like this one." President Santos closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them again, there were no tears. There was no time for tears. "Is there any hope at all?" she asked. A new voice spoke from the back of the room. "Yes, there is." Everyone turned to look at Dr. Nathan Cole. He was a thin man with wild gray hair and glasses that were always sliding down his nose. He had been the head of humanity's secret research division for 20 years. Most people in the room had never heard of him. Nathan walked to the table and placed a small data chip on the surface. The holographic map disappeared and was replaced by something new. Schematics and diagrams filled the air. Ship designs that looked nothing like anything humanity had ever built. Weapon systems that seemed impossible. Engine configurations that broke the laws of physics. "What is this?" Carl asked. "This is Project Prometheus," Nathan said. "We started developing it 10 years ago, when the alliance with the Valari was first formed. We knew that alliances can fail. We knew that today's friend can become tomorrow's enemy. So we prepared." He pointed to the schematics. "Everything here was developed in complete secrecy. We kept it off every network and every database that the Valari had access to. They never knew it existed. They still do not know it exists." Lisa Grant, who had survived the battle at Nexus Prime and escaped with Admiral Morrison, leaned forward to study the designs. "Is this a jump drive that does not need gates?" "Yes," Nathan said. "Current jump technology requires the massive gate stations that both sides control. With this drive, we can jump anywhere, anytime, without warning. The enemy will never know where we will appear next." "And these weapons?" Lisa asked, pointing to another diagram. "Shield breakers. They bypass energy shields completely. It does not matter how strong the enemy's defenses are. These weapons will go right through them." The room was starting to buzz with quiet excitement. For the first time in months, people were feeling something other than despair. "There is more," Nathan continued. "During our alliance with the Valari, we had access to their computer networks. We were supposed to be sharing information as allies. But we also planted something in their systems. Backdoors. Sleeping programs. Ways to get back in whenever we wanted." He smiled slightly. "They never found them. They never even looked. They were so sure of their own superiority that they never imagined we would betray them. And now those backdoors are still there, waiting for us to use them." President Santos studied the schematics for a long moment. Her tired eyes were growing sharper. Her bent shoulders were straightening. "How long will it take to build these ships?" she asked. 3 years, Nathan said. "Maybe 4. We have hidden facilities in the asteroid belt that the enemy does not know about. We have engineers and scientists among the survivors. We have the knowledge and the plans. We just need time." General Carl shook his head. "They will find us before then. They are still hunting for survivors. Sooner or later, they will discover our hiding places. Then we make sure they do not find us," President Santos said. Her voice was stronger now. It was the voice of a leader again. We go completely dark. No signals. No communications that can be traced. We let them think they won. Let them celebrate their victory. Let them believe that humanity is truly extinct. She stood up and looked around the room at the survivors of humanity's leadership. These were the people who would decide whether their species lived or died. We will hide, she said. We will build. We will prepare. And when we are ready, we will come back. Not just to fight them. Not just to survive. We will take everything they have. Every ship. Every planet. Every resource. Everything they own will become ours. Admiral Morrison, who had been silent until now, finally spoke. And if they find us before we are ready? President Santos met his eyes. Then we die fighting. But we will not make it easy for them. And we will make sure that whoever survives carries the memory of what was done to us. The Valari and the Dominion wanted to end humanity. They will learn that some things cannot be ended. They can only be transformed. She placed her hand on the data chip containing Project Prometheus. Today we are ashes, but from ashes, we will rise. And when we do, we will burn brighter than any star in the galaxy. The room was silent for a moment. Then, one by one, the survivors of humanity stood. They did not cheer. They did not applaud. They simply stood in silence and accepted the oath that their president had made on their behalf. They would survive. They would rebuild. And they would have their revenge. The lights in the bunker seemed a little brighter now. The air seemed a little easier to breathe. Hope had returned to humanity. It was a small hope, a fragile hope, but it was enough. The Valari had tried to kill them all. They had come very close to succeeding. But they had made one fatal mistake. They had left survivors. And survivors remember everything. 3 years and 4 months had passed since the fall of Earth. The galaxy had moved on. The war was over. Humanity was extinct. At least, that was what everyone believed. The Valari Confederacy had absorbed all of human space into their territory. The planets that had once been home to billions of people now served as mining operations and factory worlds. Valari colonists moved into the empty cities and made them their own. They renamed the streets and tore down the monuments. They erased every sign that humans had ever existed. Admiral Torvax had become the greatest hero in Valari history. He gave speeches about the glorious victory over the dangerous humans. Monuments were built in his honor. Holidays were declared to celebrate the day the human threat ended. Children learned songs about the brave Valari warriors who had saved the galaxy from destruction. The Dominion had retreated to their own borders after the war. They had gotten what they wanted. The humans were gone, and they had gained new territory in the process. Their emperor was satisfied. Peace had returned to the galaxy. Trade flourished. New alliances were formed. The memory of humanity faded into history. But in the darkest corners of space, something was stirring. Captain Emma Shaw stood on the bridge of the Time's silent wing times and watched the stars drift by. Her ship was small and fast, built with technology that the Valari could not imagine. She had no crew except for 30 hand-picked specialists. Every one of them was a ghost. Jump complete, her navigator reported. His name was Danny Ortiz, and he had lost his entire family when Earth was bombed. He never talked about it. He did not need to. Everyone on the ship had lost someone. Emma checked the tactical display. The Time's silent wing times had just jumped into the heart of Valari space. The enemy homeworld hung before them like a blue and green jewel, surrounded by defense platforms and patrol fleets. Millions of ships passed through this system every day. Billions of Valari lived on the planet below. None of them knew that a human ship was floating among them. Sensor status? Emma asked. We are completely invisible, Danny replied. Their sensors are passing right through us. They have no idea we are here. This was the power of Project Prometheus. The new ships did not just have better weapons and faster engines. They had stealth systems that made them invisible to any sensor the Valari possessed. The Time's silent wing times could fly through the middle of an enemy fleet, and no one would ever know. Emma allowed herself a small smile. For 3 years, humanity had hidden in the asteroid belts and dead systems that no one ever visited. They had built their ships in secret. They had trained their crews in silence. They had prepared for this moment. Now the ghosts were ready to haunt. Specialist Torres, Emma said, begin the upload. Amy Torres was the youngest member of the crew. She was barely 20 years old, but she was the best computer expert humanity had ever produced. Her fingers moved across the holographic controls with impossible speed. Connecting to Valari network, Amy said. They still have not patched the back doors we left during the alliance. Their security is a joke. She worked in silence for several minutes. Emma watched the tactical display and kept an eye on the patrol ships nearby. If anything went wrong, they would need to run fast. Package uploaded, Amy finally reported. The virus is now sleeping in their central defense network. They will never find it. It will just sit there, quiet and patient, until we tell it to wake up. Emma nodded with satisfaction. This was the real mission. Not fighting, not destroying, just planting seeds. Seeds that would grow into something terrible when the time came. What did you put in there? Danny asked. Everything, Amy replied. When we activate it, their defense platforms will shut down. Their communication arrays will scramble. Their targeting systems will feed them false information. Their power grids will fail. Their whole civilization will go blind and deaf at the same moment. Danny whistled softly. And they have no idea. That is the point, Emma said. They think they won. They think we are all dead. They have spent 3 years celebrating and building monuments and telling stories about their great victory. They never considered that we might still be out there, watching, waiting, preparing. She turned to face her crew. These were the survivors, the ones who had lost everything and found a reason to keep living. Revenge was that reason. The Valari took our homes, Emma said. They killed our families. They tried to wipe us from existence. And now we are standing in their most protected space, planting weapons in their most secure systems. And they do not even know we are here. She paused. This is just the beginning. There are 46 other ships doing the same thing right now. Ghost ships, moving through enemy space. Invisible and silent. By the time we are finished, we will have access to every defense grid, every military base, every communication network the Valari possess. And then? Danny asked. And then we take everything. The Time's silent wing times moved slowly through the Valari home system, gathering more intelligence as it went. Emma noted the positions of every defense platform, every patrol route, every weakness in their security. All of this information would be sent back to the hidden human bases in encrypted bursts that the Valari could never detect. As they passed the orbital stations, Emma could see Valari families going about their daily lives. Children playing in zero-gravity parks, workers heading to their jobs, couples walking together through beautiful gardens. Once, she might have felt sympathy for them. Once, she might have believed that most Valari were innocent people who had nothing to do with the war. But that was before she watched Earth burn. Before she lost her parents, her brother, her friends. Before she learned what the Valari really were. They were not innocent. They had celebrated the destruction of humanity. They had cheered when human colonies were bombed. They had taught their children that humans were dangerous monsters who deserved to die. Now they would learn what dangerous really meant. Course set for the next target, Danny reported. A military shipyard on the edge of the system. Security is minimal. Perfect, Emma said. Let us go plant another seed. The Time's silent wing times vanished into the darkness of space, leaving no trace that it had ever been there. Behind them, the Valari homeworld continued to spin peacefully, completely unaware of the doom that was growing in its own systems. Across the galaxy, other ghost ships were doing the same thing. The Time's Shadow Strike times planted viruses in Dominion communication networks. The Time's Phantom times mapped every defense installation in the former human territories. The Time's Whisper times infiltrated the personal computers of enemy admirals and politicians. The ghosts were everywhere. They saw everything. And they remembered everything. In the hidden bases scattered through the asteroid belts, the real work continued. Factories produced new ships at an incredible rate. Training academies prepared new crews for the battles ahead. Scientists developed even more powerful weapons for the coming war. Admiral Morrison watched the reports come in from his command center. Every day brought more good news. More ships completed. More systems infiltrated. More weaknesses discovered. Lisa Grant stood beside him, studying the tactical displays that now covered most of the galaxy in friendly blue dots. "We are almost ready," she said. Morrison nodded slowly. "Almost. But not yet. We only get one chance at this. If we move too early, if they discover us before we are prepared, everything we have built will be destroyed." "The crews are getting restless," Lisa said. "They want revenge. They have been waiting for years." "They will wait a little longer," Morrison said. "Because when we finally strike, I want there to be no doubt about the outcome. I want to crush them so completely that they will never threaten humanity again." He looked at the map. The Valari, the Dominion, all the races that had watched humanity burn and done nothing to help. All of them would pay. "Soon," he said softly. "Very soon." In the darkness between stars, the ghosts continued their silent work. Watching. Waiting. Preparing. The day of reckoning was coming, and when it arrived, the galaxy would never be the same. Admiral Jack Morrison stood on the bridge of the Vengeance Times, and felt the weight of 4 years pressing down on him. 4 years of hiding. 4 years of building. 4 years of waiting for this exact moment. The Vengeance Times, was the greatest warship humanity had ever built. She was 3 times the size of anything they had possessed before the war. Her weapons could crack planets. Her shields could withstand 1,000 strikes. Her engines could jump anywhere in the galaxy without warning. And she was not alone. Behind the Vengeance asterisk, 300 human ships waited in the void between stars. They were hidden in a place where no sensor could find them, where no patrol would ever look. They had gathered here in complete silence over the past month, one ship at a time, until the entire fleet was assembled. Lisa Grant stood at the tactical station. She had grown harder in the past 4 years. The young officer who had trembled during the betrayal at Nexus Prime was gone. In her place was a warrior who had trained for this day every waking hour. Kevin Price manned the sensor station nearby. He was no longer the youngest officer on the bridge. New recruits had joined the fleet. Young people who had been children when Earth burned. They had grown up with nothing but the dream of revenge to keep them going. "All ships report ready," Lisa said. "The fleet is standing by for your orders." Morrison nodded. He opened a channel to every ship in the fleet. His voice would reach 30,000 men and women who had survived the extinction of their species. They had lost their homes, their families, their entire civilization. Now, they were about to take it all back. "4 years ago, the Valari betrayed us," Morrison said. "They murdered 4,000 of our people at Nexus Prime. They burned our colonies. They bombed our homeworld. They killed billions of innocent men, women, and children whose only crime was being human." He paused to let the words sink in. "They thought they had destroyed us. They built monuments to celebrate our extinction. They taught their children that humans were monsters who deserved to die. They divided our territory between themselves and their Dominion allies. They took everything we had." His voice hardened. "Today, we take it back. Not just some of it. All of it. Every ship they own. Every planet they control. Every resource they have stolen. By the time this day is over, the Valari will have nothing left except the knowledge of what they did to us and the consequences they must now face." He straightened his shoulders and gave the order that humanity had been waiting 4 years to hear. "All ships, jump to attack positions. The reckoning begins now." 300 ships vanished from the void in perfect unison. They reappeared an instant later, in orbit around the Valari homeworld. At that exact moment, Amy Torres pressed a single button on her console. Every virus that humanity had planted over the past 3 years woke up at once. The results were immediate and catastrophic. Defense platforms that had protected the Valari homeworld for centuries went dark. Communication arrays that connected 1,000 worlds to each other began broadcasting nonsense. Power grids that supplied energy to billions of people flickered and failed. The greatest civilization in the galaxy went blind, deaf, and helpless in a single heartbeat. On the surface of the Valari homeworld, Admiral Torvax was in his office when the lights went out. Emergency power kicked in after a few seconds, but his screens showed only static. His communications were dead. His tactical displays showed nothing. "What is happening?" he demanded. "Report." His aide rushed in, face pale with fear. "Admiral, we are under attack. Ships have appeared in orbit. Hundreds of them." "What ships?" "The Dominion?" "No, sir." The aide's voice trembled. "They are human ships." Torvax felt his blood turn cold. That was impossible. The humans were extinct. He had destroyed them himself. There were monuments celebrating their death. There were holidays named after the victory. He ran to the window and looked up at the sky. He could see the battle happening in orbit. Flashes of light as weapons fired. Explosions as ships died. But something was wrong. The explosions were all on the Valari side. The Valari fleet was trying to fight back, but their targeting systems were feeding them false information. They were firing at empty space, while human weapons tore through their unshielded hulls. Ships that had never known defeat were being destroyed by enemies who should not exist. "Get me a ship," Torvax ordered. "I need to get up there and take command." "Sir, all launch systems are offline. We cannot reach orbit." Torvax watched helplessly as his fleet was torn apart. The humans were not just winning. They were destroying everything without losing a single ship. Their weapons bypassed Valari shields as if they did not exist. Their movements were too fast to track. They seemed to know exactly where every Valari ship would be before it got there. This was not a battle. It was an execution. In orbit, Admiral Morrison watched the destruction with grim satisfaction. The Valari fleet that had murdered his people at Nexus Prime was dying ship by ship. Every explosion was justice for the 4,000 lives that had been lost that day. "Enemy flagship is trying to retreat," Kevin reported. "Should we let them go?" "No," Morrison said. "No one escapes. No one carries a warning to other systems." Today the Valari learned that there is no running from what they did. The human fleet closed around the retreating ships like a net. Weapons that had been designed specifically to kill Valari technology tore through their defenses. In less than an hour, there was not a single Valari warship left in orbit. "Surface defenses are down," Lisa reported. "The planet is completely exposed." Morrison opened a channel to the Valari government. His face appeared on every working screen on the planet, broadcast directly into the homes and offices of billions of Valari citizens. "This is Admiral Jack Morrison of the human fleet," he said. 4 years ago, your people betrayed us. You murdered our families. You burned our worlds. You tried to wipe us from existence." He let the words hang in the air. "You failed." On the surface, Torvax stared at the face of the man he had tried to kill. The human looked older now, harder. There was no mercy in his eyes, only cold, patient rage. "You have 1 hour to surrender unconditionally," Morrison continued. "Every ship, every station, every weapon, every resource, everything you own, now belongs to humanity. Refuse, and we will reduce your civilization to ash. Exactly as you did to ours." "You cannot do this," Torvax whispered. "We are a great civilization. We have allies. The Dominion will come to help us." As if in answer, new reports began coming in. Human fleets were appearing over every Valari colony world. They were appearing over Dominion worlds too. The same thing that was happening here was happening everywhere at once. The humans had not just built one fleet, they had built dozens, and they had struck at every enemy target at the same moment, giving no one time to warn anyone else. The hour passed slowly. Torvax thought about fighting. He thought about rallying his people for a last stand. But there was nothing to rally. His fleet was destroyed. His defenses were gone. His communications were still jammed. He could not even send a message to the next room, let alone the next star system. At the end of the hour, white flags began rising across the Valari homeworld. Surrender signals came from every colony, every station, every ship that had somehow survived the attack. The Valari Confederacy, which had ruled 100 star systems and dominated the galaxy for 1,000 years, ceased to exist in a single day. In orbit, Morrison watched the surrender signals come in. Lisa stood beside him with tears in her eyes. Not tears of sadness. Tears of something else. Relief. Justice. The end of a long, terrible wait. "We did it," she whispered. "After everything they did to us, we actually did it." Morrison nodded slowly. "We did. But this is not over yet. The Dominion still exists. And there are a lot of Valari assets that need to be secured." He turned to face his crew. "Spread the word to all ships. The war is not won until everything they stole from us is back in human hands. Every ship, every planet, every piece of technology, everything." He looked back at the conquered world below. "They tried to take everything from us. Now, we return the favor." The human fleet spread out across Valari space, securing every system, every station, every ship that had once belonged to their enemy. The taking of everything had begun, and it would not stop until there was nothing left to take. 1 year had passed since the fall of the Valari Confederacy. The galaxy was a very different place now. President Maria Santos stood before the United Human Assembly in a building that had been constructed on the ruins of old Earth. The planet was being rebuilt, slowly but surely. New cities rose from the ashes, new forests grew where bombs had fallen, new children played in parks that had once been craters. The assembly hall was filled with representatives from every human settlement in the galaxy. There were survivors from the original fall, men and women who remembered what it was like to lose everything. There were also young people who had been born in the hidden bases, who had grown up with nothing but stories of Earth and dreams of returning home. Behind Santos, massive screens showed the current state of human territory. It was enormous, bigger than anything humanity had ever controlled before. And it was still growing. 1 year ago, we struck back against the enemies who tried to destroy us, Santos began. Today, I am pleased to report on the results of that action. She gestured to the screens, which began displaying information and images. The Valari Confederacy no longer exists as an independent power. Their fleet has been absorbed into our defense forces. Their worlds now produce goods for human reconstruction. Their technology has been studied, improved, and integrated into our own systems. The images showed Valari ships painted with human markings, Valari factories producing human goods, Valari workers building human homes on human worlds. The Valari themselves have been given a choice, Santos continued. They may live peacefully under human governance, following our laws and contributing to our society. Those who accept these terms are treated fairly. Those who do not are relocated to designated settlement zones where they can live apart from human civilization. Some in the assembly shifted uncomfortably at this. There were debates about whether humanity should be more forgiving, about whether they were becoming as bad as their enemies, about whether revenge had gone too far. Santos addressed these concerns directly. I know some of you believe we have been too harsh, that we should offer the Valari full citizenship and equal rights immediately. Perhaps one day that will be possible. But not today. The Valari celebrated our genocide. They taught their children that killing humans was heroic. They built monuments to the destruction of our homeworld. Her voice hardened. Trust must be earned. It cannot be given to those who cheered while our families burned. The Valari will have their chance to prove themselves worthy of trust, but that proof will take generations, not years. The screens shifted to show other regions of space. The Dominion has been dismantled, Santos reported. Their military has been destroyed. Their empire has been divided into independent states that are no longer capable of threatening anyone. Their ruling class has been arrested and faces trial for their role in the attempted genocide of humanity. Images showed Dominion leaders being led away in chains, Dominion warships being scrapped for parts, Dominion colonies declaring independence from their former masters. The species that were enslaved by the Dominion have been liberated. They now govern themselves. Some have chosen to ally with humanity. Others prefer to remain neutral. We respect their choice. We will not force friendship on anyone. Admiral Morrison watched from the gallery. Beside him sat Lisa Grant and Kevin Price, both now holding ranks they had never imagined possible. They had been junior officers when the war began. Now they commanded fleets and made decisions that affected billions of lives. Is it enough? Kevin asked quietly, echoing a question he had asked a year before. Morrison considered his answer carefully. He looked at the screens showing the rebuilt cities of Earth. He thought about the memorial wall outside, where 4,000 names were carved in stone. He remembered the faces of the people he had lost. The Valari took everything from us, he finally said. Our homes, our families, our future. Now, we have taken everything from them. But this is not revenge. This is consequences. He paused. Revenge would be killing them all. Revenge would be burning their worlds like they burned ours. Revenge would be teaching our children to hate them forever. We have not done any of those things. Then what have we done? Lisa asked. We have shown the galaxy what happens when you try to destroy humanity. We have made sure that no one will ever attempt it again, and we have built a future where our children can grow up safe, knowing that they will never have to fear what we feared. Santos was finishing her speech. The galaxy has learned a lesson that it will not soon forget. Humanity can be befriended. We can be allied with. We can be trusted. But we cannot be betrayed. We cannot be murdered. We cannot be erased from existence. She looked directly at the cameras that were broadcasting her words across the galaxy. To any civilization that might consider threatening humanity in the future, I offer this warning. Look at what remains of the Valari. Look at what remains of the Dominion. These were great powers that dominated the galaxy for centuries. They tried to destroy us, and now they have nothing. Everything they built, everything they owned, everything they were, now belongs to humanity. Her voice softened slightly. We do not seek conflict. We do not want enemies. We would prefer to live in peace with all species and all civilizations. But we will never again be vulnerable. We will never again trust blindly. And we will never forget what was done to us. She concluded with words that would become famous throughout the galaxy. Humanity remembers, humanity endures, and humanity repays. The assembly rose in applause. Outside, across the rebuilt cities of Earth, people celebrated another anniversary of their survival and triumph. But the celebrations were tempered by memory, by the knowledge of what had been lost and what had been sacrificed. On the memorial wall outside the assembly building, the 4,000 names still stood. Below them, the inscription remained unchanged. Never forgotten. Never again. Years later, a young Valari named Saris would stand before a human trade council and ask if there would ever be forgiveness. The council chair, an old woman named Margaret Hill who had lost her entire family in the fall of Earth, would tell her the truth. Forgiveness is earned through generations of trust rebuilt, one honest act at a time. Your grandchildren may see it. You will not. And Saris would bow her head and accept this, because there was nothing else to accept. Outside the council chambers, human ships patrolled the skies. They were watching. They were waiting. They were ready. They would never be caught off guard again. In the streets of New Washington, a child asked her mother why there were so many alien workers everywhere. Because they made a terrible mistake once, her mother said, and now they are paying for it. The child nodded and accepted this as children do. She did not know the details of what had happened. She did not know about Nexus Prime or the fall of Earth, or the years of hiding in asteroid belts. She only knew that humanity had won, and that their enemies had lost. That was enough for now. The full history would come later, when she was old enough to understand it. For now, she lived in a galaxy where humanity was strong, where humanity was safe, where humanity owned everything that had once belonged to their enemies. The Valari had tried to end humanity. Instead, they had made humanity greater than ever before. The Dominion had helped them and suffered the same fate. Now both civilizations served the species they had tried to destroy. There was a certain poetry in that, a certain justice. The galaxy had learned its lesson. Humanity could be befriended. Humanity could be allied with. But humanity should never, ever be betrayed. Those who forgot this lesson would learn it again, and again, and again, until there was no one left who needed to be taught. On the memorial wall, the names of the dead watched over the living. They had been the first victims of the betrayal, but they had also been the spark that lit the fire of humanity's rebirth. Their deaths had been avenged 1,000-fold. Their names would be remembered forever, and the civilization that had killed them was now nothing but a servant to the species they had tried to destroy. This was the story of humanity's greatest defeat and greatest victory. This was the story of how they lost everything and took everything back. This was the story of why you should never double-cross humans in war, because humans remember, and humans collect what they are owed. Every last thing.